The spring sun hung high over Clearwater Valley, casting gold across the mirror surface of the lake. Ethan Cole sat in his weathered wooden boat, fishing line trailing into water so clear he could see the rocky bottom 15 feet down. On the dock, his 9-year-old son Noah lay on his stomach, flipping through a book about airplanes. Pine trees framed the valley like cathedral walls. Birds called. The world felt small and safe. Then the sky tore open with a mechanical shriek. A private jet tilted at a sickening angle, black smoke pouring from its right engine. It hit the water 200 yards away. Ethan dropped his fishing rod and dove. Through the murky cloud of jet fuel, he saw the cockpit sinking. He yanked at the shattered window and pulled a woman free. She coughed once, violently, then breathed. He didn't know she was Vivian Hale. The next morning, Ethan stood in his small kitchen, brewing coffee in a dented percolator that had belonged to his father. Sunlight filtered through lace curtains his late wife had hung 6 years ago. The cabin smelled like pine and old paper. On the television in the corner, a news anchor was speaking in urgent tones about a miraculous survival. The screen showed aerial footage of rescue boats circling the crash site. Divers in the water. Coast Guard helicopters overhead. The banner read, "Billionaire CEO, survives jet crash." Ethan turned it off before the reporter could say the woman's name. He didn't need to know. Heroes, in his experience, didn't get happy endings. They got complications. He poured his coffee and looked out the window at the lake. It was calm again, as if yesterday had never happened, as if the jet hadn't carved a scar across the sky. 6 years ago, Ethan had been a senior aerospace engineer at Hale Dynamics. He'd worked on experimental aircraft, systems so advanced they barely had names. He'd loved the work, loved the precision of it, the way metal and math and motion came together to defy gravity. But he'd also seen something no one else wanted to see. A flaw, a hydraulic control system that failed under specific stress conditions. He'd written reports, sent emails, flagged it in meetings. His supervisor had smiled and told him not to worry. The higher-ups would handle it. They didn't. 3 months later, during a test flight over the Nevada desert, the system failed. The aircraft exploded mid-air. The pilot survived with minor injuries, ejecting just before the blast. But Ethan's wife, Rebecca, who had been visiting the observation tower that day with other families, did not. The shockwave from the blast shattered the tower's west wall. She'd been standing right there, holding their 3-year-old son's hand, pointing at the sky. Ethan had quit the next day. No severance, no apology. Just a non-disclosure agreement and a polite suggestion that he move on with his life. The company offered a settlement for Rebecca's death, calling it a tragic accident, an unforeseeable catastrophic failure. They paid for the funeral. They sent flowers. They never admitted fault, so he had left. He'd taken Noah, barely 3 years old at the time, and driven north until the roads turned to gravel and the gravel turned to dirt. He'd bought this cabin with the last of their savings. It had no internet, no cell service unless you climbed to the ridge. Just a wood stove, a dock, and a view of the lake that stretched for miles. He fixed engines for the locals, small motors, lawnmowers, chainsaws, the occasional truck. He taught Noah how to fish, how to read the weather by the color of the sky, how to be kind even when the world wasn't. At night, after Noah fell asleep, he read old engineering textbooks by lantern light, not because he missed the work, but because he couldn't forget it. The equations, the stress calculations, the warnings he'd written that no one had read. His neighbor, an older man named Carl, who ran the general store in town, had asked him once why someone with his skills was living like a hermit in the mountains. Ethan had only smiled and said he liked the quiet. The truth was too heavy to share. The scar on his wrist, thin and white, was a reminder of the system that had failed him, of the warnings ignored, of the price he'd paid for telling the truth. Now, 6 years later, the cabin was filled with the quiet sounds of a life rebuilt. Noah's laughter, the crackle of the wood stove, the rustle of pages turning. It wasn't the life Ethan had imagined, but it was the one he had, and it was enough. He didn't know that the woman he'd pulled from the lake was hunting for the person responsible for nearly killing her. He didn't know that her survival had set something in motion that couldn't be stopped. The sound of engines rumbled up the dirt road just after 10 in the morning. Ethan was outside, splitting firewood on the chopping block. His flannel sleeves rolled up despite the spring chill. Noah was inside, working on a model airplane at the kitchen table. Glue and balsa wood scattered across the surface. The rumble grew louder, deeper, the kind of sound that didn't belong in a place like this. Then 3 black Cadillacs emerged from the tree line, their polished hoods gleaming in the sunlight. Dust rose in slow clouds behind them, drifting through the shafts of light that cut between the pines. Ethan set the axe down and wiped his hands on his jeans, his pulse quickening. The lead car stopped 10 feet from the porch. The door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was tall, early 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a sharp ponytail. She wore a charcoal blazer and slacks that probably cost more than Ethan's truck. A faint bruise marked her left temple, and there was a bandage on her jaw, white against her pale skin. But her eyes were steady, confident. Vivian Hale walked forward, her heels crunching on the gravel. Behind her, 2 assistants emerged from the other cars, both men in dark suits, carrying leather folders and tablets. One of them held a thick envelope, the kind that held checks with too many zeros. Vivian stopped a few feet away and extended her hand. Her grip was firm, professional, the kind of handshake that closed deals and ended arguments. "You saved my life," she said, her voice clear and direct. "Then you disappeared before I could even thank you. I wanted to do that in person." Ethan withdrew his hand slowly, his expression unreadable. "No need. I did what anyone would have done." Vivian's lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile. Not anyone. Most people would have filmed it and posted it before calling for help. Her assistant stepped forward, offering the envelope with both hands, like it was something sacred. "We'd like to offer compensation for your bravery, and we'll need you to sign a non-disclosure agreement, standard procedure for incidents involving the company." Ethan didn't take it. He looked past her, at the lake glittering through the trees, then back at her face. His voice was quiet but firm. "I don't want money, and I don't sign things anymore." Vivian tilted her head slightly, studying him the way someone might study a puzzle with a missing piece. There was something in his tone, something old and bitter, and carefully controlled. "You're not curious why my plane went down?" she asked. "Not my business," Ethan said. "It could have been sabotage," Vivian continued, watching his face. "The FAA is investigating. Someone might have tampered with the hydraulic systems." Ethan's jaw tightened. Just for a second. But he said nothing. Vivian glanced past him, toward the open cabin door. She could see inside. The simple furniture, handmade and sturdy. The stack of firewood beside the stove. The framed photo on the wall of a woman holding a baby, both of them smiling. And next to it, pinned with thumbtacks to a corkboard, a series of technical drawings, blueprints, schematics, clean lines, precise measurements, professional notations in neat handwriting. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she focused on the corner of the nearest drawing. The logo was unmistakable. Hale Dynamics. Her breath caught. Her gaze flicked back to Ethan. His face was unreadable now, a mask of calm that didn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Noah appeared in the doorway, curious, clutching his model plane in one hand. "Dad, who are they?" Ethan's expression softened immediately. "Just people passing through, bud. Go back inside." Noah nodded and disappeared into the cabin. Vivian looked at the empty doorway, then back at Ethan. Something shifted in her eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or understanding. She nodded slowly, as if something had clicked into place. "Thank you again, Mr. Cole," she said quietly, using his name for the first time. "If you ever need anything, you know how to reach me." She didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked back to the car. The Cadillacs reversed down the narrow road, engines purring, disappearing into the trees as smoothly as they'd arrived. Noah stepped back onto the porch. "Dad, why'd she come all the way out here just to say thank you?" Ethan watched the dust settle. "She's from a different world, Noah, not ours." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't that simple. Not anymore. By late afternoon, the story had spread across the valley and beyond. Not the quiet version where a man saved a life and went home. The twisted one. The one that sold. Someone had leaked a video of the crash, a blurry phone recording from a hiker on the ridge who'd been filming the landscape when the jet went down. It showed the impact, the plume of water, and a small figure swimming toward the wreckage. Within hours, the footage had been shared thousands of times. News outlets picked it up, bloggers analyzed it frame by frame. And then the headlines began to multiply, each one worse than the last. Hero or setup? Questions surround mysterious CEO, rescue, billionaire's crash. Was she lured to remote lake? The articles speculated wildly. A man living alone in the woods, no job, no history anyone could find. A woman who just happened to crash practically on top of his property. The valley, which had been Ethan's sanctuary for 6 years, became a trap almost overnight. Reporters arrived by midday, renting rooms at the inn in town, parking their vans along the main road, knocking on doors and asking neighbors for quotes. Carl's general store became ground zero. Cameras set up outside, journalists buying coffee, and asking everyone who walked in if they knew Ethan Cole. Carl called from the store around 2 in the afternoon, his voice apologetic and strained. Ethan, I'm real sorry about this. They're saying things, bad things. People are starting to believe it. Ethan thanked him and hung up without saying much else. At the garage where he worked part-time, his boss, a man named Ray who'd given him a chance when no one else would, pulled him aside near the end of the day. Ray's face was apologetic but firm. Look, Ethan, I don't believe what they're saying, but people are talking, and my customers are uncomfortable. I think it's better if you take some time off. Just until this blows over. Ethan didn't argue. He packed his toolbox in silence, hands steady, jaw tight, and walked out to his truck. At the grocery store that evening, picking up bread and milk for Noah, he felt the stares. Whispers followed him down the aisles like shadows. A woman with a shopping cart stepped back as he passed, pulling her young daughter closer, like he was dangerous. Near the register, a man in a work jacket muttered to his friend, loud enough to be heard, probably planned the whole thing. You don't just happen to be there when a billionaire crashes. Ethan set his groceries down on the counter and walked out without buying anything. That night, rain hammered the cabin roof. A steady drumming that filled the silence. Noah sat at the kitchen table, picking at his dinner. The boy's eyes were red. Dad, why are people saying you're bad? Ethan looked at his son across the table. The boy who'd lost his mother before he was old enough to remember her face clearly. Who'd never asked for any of this. He wanted to explain that the world didn't care about truth when a lie was more interesting. That people believed what they wanted to believe because it was easier than thinking. But he didn't say any of that. He just reached across the table and squeezed Noah's hand. Sometimes people get scared of things they don't understand. It'll pass. Noah looked down at his plate. Will it? Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't promise something he didn't believe himself. He stood, cleared the plates, and turned off the kitchen light. In the darkness, he could hear the rain and the boys breathing and the distant hum of the world turning against him. Miles away, in her office at Hale Dynamics, Vivian sat at her desk, staring at a screen. The radar logs from the flight. There was a gap. A deliberate cut in the signal. Someone had tried to kill her. The Hale Dynamics tower rose 40 stories above Seattle's skyline, glass and steel reflecting the gray clouds that hung over the city like a shroud. Vivian's office was on the top floor, all clean lines and minimalist furniture, leather chairs and a desk made of reclaimed wood. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over Puget Sound, the water dark and restless under the overcast sky. But tonight, it felt like a cage. She sat alone, the city lights glowing faintly beyond the windows. Her computer hummed softly. She opened the employee database, hesitating for just a moment before typing a name into the search bar. Ethan Cole. The file loaded slowly. Then the words appeared. Employment terminated following incident review. Ineligible for rehire. She clicked deeper. A personnel report from 6 years ago. A technical memo. A series of emails. She read them in silence, her face growing pale. Ethan had warned them. Not once. Not twice. 7 separate communications about a critical flaw in the hydraulic control system. He'd flagged it as high priority, sent it up the chain to his supervisor, then to the engineering director, then to the VP of operations. Each time, he'd been told the same thing. We'll look into it. It's under review, but they hadn't. 3 months later, the test flight over Nevada. The explosion. 1 fatality listed in the official report. Civilian observer. Name redacted for privacy. But Vivian opened the attached incident file. The name was there. Rebecca Cole. Wife of Ethan Cole. Survived by husband and 1 minor child. Vivian's hands trembled. She sat back in her chair, staring at the screen. The man who'd saved her life had lost his wife because her company had chosen profit over safety. A knock at the door made her jump. She closed the file quickly. Her uncle, Grant Hale, stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. He was 62, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a tailored Navy suit. He'd been with the company for 30 years, longer than Vivian had been alive. He smiled. But it didn't reach his eyes. Working late again, Vivian? She forced herself to smile back. Just catching up. The crash investigation is taking up a lot of time. Grant walked to the window, hands in his pockets. I heard about your visit to the valley. To see the man who pulled you out. I wanted to thank him in person, Vivian said carefully. It seemed like the right thing to do. Of course, Grant said smoothly. But you should be careful. People talk. And they're already making this more complicated than it needs to be. Vivian's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice neutral. He didn't do anything wrong. He saved my life. Grant turned from the window. I'm sure he did. But perception matters. You know that better than anyone. He stepped toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. You're not digging into old personnel files, are you? The question hung in the air. Casual but pointed. Vivian's heart thudded in her chest. But she kept her face perfectly neutral. Why would I do that? Grant smiled again. No reason. Just don't want you wasting time on ghosts when we have real problems to deal with. He left. Vivian waited until his footsteps faded completely. Then she opened the file again, printed everything, and slipped the pages into her bag. She walked out of the building into the rain, her mind racing. The man who'd saved her had been destroyed by her family. And now she had to decide what to do with that truth. The call came at 9:43 at night. Ethan's phone, an old flip model he kept charged more out of habit than necessity, buzzed on the kitchen counter. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick it up. Mr. Cole? The voice was calm, professional. This is Vivian Hale. Ethan's grip tightened. How'd you get this number? I have resources. I need to see you, tonight. It's important. I don't think that's a good idea. The press is already. Your son, Vivian interrupted. Noah. He has asthma, doesn't he? Ethan's blood went cold. What are you talking about? A crash came from Noah's room, followed by a choked, gasping sound. Ethan dropped the phone and ran. Noah was sitting up in bed, clutching his chest, his face pale and slick with sweat. His mouth was open, struggling for air, each breath a shallow, desperate wheeze. Ethan grabbed the inhaler from the nightstand, shook it, pressed it to Noah's lips. Nothing. Empty. He tore through the bathroom cabinet. The backup inhaler wasn't there. Noah's breaths came in short, desperate wheezes, his lips tinged blue. Panic clawed at Ethan's throat. He scooped Noah up and ran for the front door. But before he reached it, headlights flooded the driveway. The black Cadillac skidded to a stop. Vivian jumped out. Get in. Now. Ethan didn't hesitate. He climbed into the back seat, cradling Noah against his chest. Vivian slid behind the wheel and gunned the engine. The car roared down the dirt road, headlights cutting through the darkness. Noah's breathing was growing shallower. Ethan held him tighter, his voice breaking. Stay with me, buddy. Stay with me. The drive should have taken 40 minutes. Vivian made it in 25. The emergency room doors flew open. Nurses rushed forward with a gurney. Ethan set Noah down, his hands shaking. A doctor in blue scrubs took over, hooking Noah to a nebulizer. The boy's chest began to rise and fall more steadily. Ethan sank into a plastic chair in the hallway, his head in his hands. Vivian stood a few feet away, soaked from the rain. She didn't say anything. She just stayed. An hour passed. Finally, the doctor emerged. He's stable. We'll keep him overnight. But he's going to be fine. Ethan exhaled, a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh. He walked into the room and sat beside his son's bed. Noah's eyes were half closed, the oxygen mask fogging with each breath. "Dad? I'm here. I'm right here." Vivian appeared in the doorway. Ethan looked at her, his eyes red. "Thank you. Without you, I couldn't have saved him." She stepped closer. "You're not alone in this, not anymore." Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. He held it out. "Everything I kept. The warnings. The emails. The proof of what happened 6 years ago. It's all here." Vivian took it, her fingers closing around the cold metal. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because you're the only one who can do something with it." She nodded slowly. "Then I will. I promise." The conference room was small and anonymous, tucked into a law office on the edge of downtown Seattle. Vivian sat at one end of the long table, Ethan at the other. Between them, an independent forensic engineer named Dr. Laura Simmons connected the USB drive to her laptop. The projector hummed to life. The screen lit up. Files opened one by one, emails with subject lines like, "Urgent, hydraulic system review needed and re." Safety concerns, no response. Scanned pages of handwritten notes, technical drawings with annotations in red ink. Photos of cracked metal components. Test data showing failure rates far above acceptable thresholds. Dr. Simmons scrolled through it all in silence, her expression darkening with each new document. She opened an email from Ethan to his supervisor. "Hydraulic control system shows catastrophic failure under sustained load. Recommend immediate grounding of all units pending redesign." The response, 3 days later, was a single line. "Your concerns are noted. Continue with scheduled production." Dr. Simmons clicked to another file, a memo from the engineering director to the executive team. "Minor technical issue flagged by junior engineer. Cost of recall estimated at $2.3 billion. Recommend internal review only." She leaned back in her chair. Finally, she looked up. "This is damning. Whoever signed off on these systems knew they were unstable. Knew people could die." Vivian's voice was quiet. "Who signed off?" Dr. Simmons clicked open a scanned approval form. At the bottom, a signature in blue ink. "Grant Hale." The room went still. Ethan leaned back, his face unreadable. Vivian stared at the screen, her hands flat on the table. "He approved it to avoid a recall," Dr. Simmons said. "A recall would have cost the company billions. So he buried the reports and pushed the aircraft into production anyway." She glanced at Ethan. He made sure the blame went elsewhere, blamed the pilot, and when that wasn't enough, he made sure the person who'd warned them couldn't warn anyone else. Ethan's voice was flat. "They fired me the day after the explosion, told me if I talked to anyone, they'd sue me and make sure I never worked again." Vivian stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Rain streaked the glass. "If I go public with this," she said slowly, "it'll destroy the company. Thousands of people will lose their jobs. My family's name will be ruined." Ethan's voice cut through. "And if you don't, more people will die." She turned to face him. His eyes were steady, not accusing, just honest. Vivian nodded. "Then I know what I have to do." Dr. Simmons closed the laptop. "I'll prepare a full technical report. It'll hold up in court. In front of the FAA. Anywhere you need it." Vivian thanked her and left the office. Ethan followed her into the parking garage. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "You could bury it." Protect yourself. Vivian looked at him. I could. But then I'd be just like him. She paused. The truth always rises. Like that plane in the lake. It doesn't stay hidden forever. Ethan almost smiled. No. It doesn't. Vivian got into her car. Before she drove away, she rolled down the window. I'll need you to testify. When this goes public, I will, Ethan said. She nodded, then pulled out into the rain. The emergency board meeting was called for 8 in the morning on a Thursday. The conference room on the 40th floor was already full when Vivian arrived. Executives in tailored suits sat around the long table. Tablets open. Coffee cups steaming. Lawyers with briefcases lined the walls. Grant Hale sat at the head of the table, his expression calm, his fingers steepled. The morning sun streamed through the windows. Vivian entered last, carrying a slim leather folder and a tablet. She didn't sit. Every eye in the room turned to her. Grant smiled. Vivian. Good. Let's keep this brief. We need to address the media situation and finalize our response strategy. I agree, Vivian said. She walked to the front of the room and connected her tablet to the wall-mounted screen. The display flickered to life. An email appeared. The date was clear. 6 years and 4 months ago. The subject line read, Hydraulic failure risk, immediate action required. The sender was Ethan Cole. End as is.o. The room shifted. Murmurs rippled through the executives. Grant's smile faded. Vivian clicked to the next slide. A photo of a cracked hydraulic component. Then, another email. This one from Grant himself. Bury this. We're not recalling 50 aircraft over a minor flaw. Production continues as scheduled. She let the words hang in the air. One of the board members stood abruptly. This is... If these documents are authentic, they're real, Vivian said. She clicked again. A scanned approval form. Grant's signature at the bottom. The incident report from the Nevada test flight. 1 civilian fatality. Rebecca Cole, another board member, stood. His face pale. He closed his folder and walked out. Then another followed. Within 2 minutes, half the room was empty. Grant slammed his hand on the table. You're going to destroy this company. Everything we've built, everything your father worked for. Vivian turned to face him. No, Uncle Grant. You already did that when you chose money over lives. She set the leather folder on the table in front of him. I'm stepping down as CEO, effective immediately. I've contacted the FAA. They'll be opening a full investigation. You'll be hearing from them very soon. Grant's face went red. You think you're a hero? You think this makes you better than me? No, Vivian said quietly. I'm choosing the right side. Finally. She walked toward the door. Behind her, the room erupted. Outside the building, reporters waited on the plaza. Vivian pushed through the glass doors. Cameras flashed. Microphones thrust forward. Miss Hale, is it true you're accusing your own uncle of sabotage? Vivian stopped at the top of the steps. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. The evidence speaks for itself, and I will cooperate fully with any and all investigations into Hale dynamic safety practices, both past and present. A reporter pushed forward. What about Grant Hale? That's for the authorities to determine. I've provided them with everything they need. She turned and walked to her car. Inside, her hands shook, but she started the engine and drove. At his cabin, Ethan sat on the porch with his laptop. The headline scrolled across the bottom. CEO exposes family cover-up in deadly plane crash scandal. He closed the screen. He looked out at the lake. The sky was clearing. For the first time in years, he felt like he could breathe. 2 days later, Vivian drove back to the valley. This time, she came alone. No assistants, no Cadillacs. Just a rental sedan and a bag of groceries. She parked beside Ethan's truck and knocked on the door. Noah answered, his face lighting up. You came back. Vivian smiled. I promised, didn't I? Ethan appeared behind him. Surprised. I didn't think you'd come. I'm not here as a CEO, Vivian said. I'm here as someone who owes you more than I can ever repay. She held up the bag. I brought dinner. If that's okay. Ethan stepped aside. Come in. They ate at the small kitchen table. Spaghetti with marinara, garlic bread, a salad. Simple food. Noah talked about his model planes, showing Vivian his latest project. She listened, asking questions, genuinely interested. After Noah went to bed, Ethan and Vivian sat on the porch, mugs of coffee in their hands. The stars were out. I lost my faith in people a long time ago, Ethan said. After Rebecca died, after they fired me, I stopped believing that doing the right thing mattered. Vivian looked at him. And now? Now I think maybe it does. Because of what you did. You risked everything. Your career. Your family. That's not nothing. Vivian shook her head. I didn't do anything you wouldn't have done. You did more, Ethan said. You listened. You believed me. You chose truth over comfort. Vivian was quiet. I keep thinking about your wife. About Rebecca. I can't undo that, but I can make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. Ethan's voice was soft. You already have. Vivian stood to leave. At the door, she turned. There's a position opening. Head of Safety and Compliance. It's not glamorous, but it's important, and I can't think of anyone better. Ethan hesitated. I don't know if I'm ready for that world again. You don't have to decide now. Just think about it. She walked to her car. Before she drove away, Ethan called after her. Vivian. She stopped. You gave my wife justice. Thank you. Vivian's eyes glistened. But she didn't let the tears fall. She nodded and drove into the night. Ethan stood on the porch. For the first time in 6 years, the weight on his chest felt lighter. The next morning, the Cadillacs returned. All 3 of them. But this time, they didn't carry power. They carried hope. Vivian stepped out, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater. Noah ran out to meet her, grinning. Did you bring more books? I did. And something else. She handed Ethan a folder. Inside was a contract. Consultant position. Safety advisor. Flexible hours. Good pay. And a clause at the bottom. All recommendations to be implemented without executive override. Full authority on safety decisions. Ethan looked up. You're serious. Completely. The company needs someone who isn't afraid to tell the truth. Someone who's already proven they'll fight for what's right. That's you. Ethan glanced at Noah, who was watching with wide eyes. Dad, you should do it. You think so? Yeah. You're good at fixing things. And maybe it's time to stop hiding. Ethan's throat tightened. He looked back at Vivian. I'm not good at boardrooms. Or politics. Good, she said. I don't need a politician. I need an engineer. Someone who sees what others miss. Ethan took a breath. Okay. I'll do it. Vivian smiled. Together, the 3 of them walked down to the lake. The water was calm. Vivian stood at the edge. This is where it started. Where you pulled me out. Ethan stood beside her. And where you pulled me out, too. Noah tossed a stone into the water, watching the ripples spread. Do you think people can change? Vivian glanced at Ethan, then back at the boy. I think they can try, and sometimes that's enough. The wind picked up. The sun broke through the clouds. Vivian turned to Ethan. You saved me from the water. Now, I'm pulling you out of the dark. Ethan smiled. Guess we're even. Not even close, she said. But it's a start. 1 year later, the grand opening of the Hale Safety Foundation took place at the newly renovated headquarters. The building was smaller than the old tower, built with reclaimed wood and floor-to-ceiling windows designed to let in light. Inside, a crowd gathered. Engineers and safety advocates, families of crash victims, whistleblowers who'd been silenced, students studying aerospace engineering, journalists with cameras. Vivian stood at the podium, dressed in a sharp blazer but with her hair down. She looked out at the crowd. A year ago, I almost died. Not because of bad luck or an act of God, but because people in positions of power chose profit over safety, chose silence over truth. She paused. One man chose differently. 6 years ago, Ethan Cole warned my company about a critical flaw that would cost lives. He did everything right. And for that, he was punished. He lost his job. He lost his wife in the very accident he tried to prevent. Her eyes found Ethan in the front row. He sat beside Noah, who was dressed in a button-down shirt. This foundation exists because of people like him. People who refuse to stay quiet when they see something wrong. Who believe that doing the right thing matters, even when it costs them everything. The room erupted in applause. People stood. On the screen behind Vivian, headlines scrolled. Grant Hale, indicted on 12 counts of corporate negligence. Hale Dynamics announces independent ethics board. Families of crash victims praise company's transparency. Vivian stepped down from the podium. Ethan met her at the edge of the stage. "You did it," he said. "We did it," she corrected. The reception lasted another 2 hours. Ethan talked to other engineers who'd been silenced. They thanked him. They told him he'd given them hope. That afternoon, they returned to Clearwater Valley. Ethan launched the old wooden boat. Noah carried a model plane he'd been working on for months, sleek and silver, with perfect lines. He set it carefully on the water's surface. For a moment, it just floated. Then the wind caught it, and it began to glide forward. Vivian stood at the shore, her hands in her pockets. "You know, I used to think power was about control, about being the one in charge. And now?" Ethan asked. "Now I think it's about letting go. About trusting other people to do what's right." Noah ran back from the water's edge, his shoes wet, his face flushed with happiness. Ethan pulled him close. The three of them stood at the edge of the lake as the sun began to set. The light turned golden, then amber, reflecting off the water in shimmering waves. Vivian spoke quietly. "Sometimes the most valuable thing isn't saving someone's life. It's being forgiven." Ethan looked at her. "You didn't need forgiveness. You needed courage, and you found it." She smiled. The past wasn't erased. The pain wasn't gone. But the future felt possible. The lake shimmered. The sky stretched wide and clear, and the light on the water looked like hope.